Coming up next, the story of one of the biggest selling rock bands ever, and their all-important third album is told by two great interviewees who actually co-wrote the two hits that transformed this band into rock royalty. Now, their first two albums had established them as a force to be reckoned with for sure, but it also typecast them as soft rockers. The band's leader wanted to harden up their sound, so they fired their producer and shelved all the songs from the session, but two of them. They got a third guitarist and were sent a song that would end up being their heaviest rocker yet. But they also had a ballad from their previous session that was written in a booth at a restaurant in the middle of dinner that had a lot of promise. But they were really reluctant to release it, and they went with the rocker first. Did pretty good. It hit number 32. Defiant against releasing this ballad, they had another rocker as their second single. It wasn't a hit. Finally, they released the ballad. They didn't want to do it. But to their shock, the label edited the hell out of it without the band's permission. But it became their first number one hit. Coming up next, the co-writers of both these hits give us the inside scoop. We find out how the band got even with the label for editing the song. It's coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you remember wearing TNC surf design shirts growing up, you're going to dig this channel of deep musical nostalgia. Make sure to subscribe below right now. Click the big red button so you always know when our stuff comes out. Click the bell. That'll tell you when the new interviews and the new videos come out. Also, check us out on Patreon and check out our latest merch below. So it's time for our latest edition of Revelations, where featured artists go deep on their greatest songs and albums, stories you truly won't find anywhere else. Now today, we have two Songwriter Hall of Famers who helped mold the careers of many great artists from the 70s and 80s with their songwriting. But most notably, they both wrote several standards for Eagles, including these songs right here.
To give me the best of your love. 'Cause I'm already gone.
Eagles were coming off two albums that established them as the ultimate practitioners of country rock. I mean, we're talking hits like Take It Easy, Witchy Woman, Desperado. But the band, especially leader Glenn Frey, wanted to take their music into a harder rock direction. Now, when I say harder rock, I'm not saying hard rock. I'm just saying they wanted to transform their sound from the softer country rock stylings to straight up rock for the third album. Problem is, their producer of the first two albums wanted them to repeat the sound they had before. Glenn Johns, he was defiant. When Glenn said that the band wanted to rock, Johns felt that they were not capable of that and told the band straight up, and I quote, "You are not a rock and roll band. The Who is a rock and roll band, and you're not that." The band was also frustrated with the producer's no-drug policy, so in the end, they fired Glenn Johns and hired Bill Seismic, who had just produced Joe Walsh's album. Now, this was before Walsh was an Eagle. They scrapped all the work they'd done with Glenn Johns, except for a couple of songs, including the ballad Best of My Love.
Every night I'm lying in bed.
Now, Best of My Love, that was written by Don Henley, Glenn Frey, and friend and frequent collaborator J.D. Souther. Get this, they wrote this song at a booth at a restaurant in the middle of dinner. That's how great these guys were. Then they got another song sent to them by friend and collaborator Jack Tempchin. This was a song he'd written the first and only time that he got drunk, which he'll tell the story next. It's pretty funny. The band loved Tempchin's song because it was a rocker. It actually ended up being the most energetic rocker that Eagles ever did. So as they finished the album and the band set their eyes on releasing the straight-ahead rockers, even adding guitarist Don Felder in the process of finishing the album, Jack Tempchin's contribution, Already Gone, came out first.
Well, I heard some people talking just the other day.
It hit number 32 and it pushed their new sound. The label thought that the soft ballad would be a great follow-up.
Faces, loud empty places.
But Glenn Frey and the band were reluctant to do so. They wanted to keep their rock edge, so they released James Dean. It missed the top 40 altogether. Great song. So for their third single, they finally dropped the ball on Best of My Love. It soared to the top of the charts. It became their first number one hit. And it established the Eagles as a force beyond the typecast. And a few years later, when the Emotions had a song called Best of My Love, also hit number one, became the only song to have the same title of a song hit number one. Coming up next, both J.D. Souther and Jack Tempchin tell us the story of these two big hits from the Eagles' third album, On the Border, and how it established the band as legends and it showed their versatility. And something I forgot, the label edited the hell out of Best of My Love. They cut it way down, and they did it without the band's permission. The band was pissed. So after it hit number one and it sold 1 million copies, Irving Azoff, the legendary Eagles manager, actually sent an award to Asylum Records, who had edited the crap out of this record. He sent a gold record with a huge section cut out of it, and it was on a plaque, and below it said, the Golden Hacksaw Award. And that's how they got even with the record label. Very cool. So let's get into it. The story of two great songs. As we get into this interview, I do want to thank our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear. The glasses I always wear. The best frames that Zenni has right now for your money are the blue light glasses with multicolored lenses. It's a first of its kind innovation. Blocks plus tints technology blocks more blue light than ever, filtering digital screen glare and UV light with 8 different tinted lenses to choose from. Just click on the info button right up here to get yours today or below. Here's J.D. Souther and Jack Tempchin on Two Eagles Standards. I wanted to ask you about Best of My Love. First number one single by the Eagles and your first collaborative chart topper. Started with Glenn being inspired by a song by Fred Neil, as I understand it.
That was my memory of it. That rumor started because of me, and I think it's true. We used to listen to a lot of Fred Neil.
I've been searching for the dolphin.
And this tuning, I think it was, I'm pretty sure Glenn was the first one at this point of the song to be playing in this tuning. Because you could actually play the 1 and the 4 chord, get a real interesting inversion on both by just using your thumb for the bottom 2 strings. It's a special tuning, which I'm not going to give away at this moment. But yeah, I think Glenn and I had been farting around with that tuning a couple of years before, and he started that song, and it just sounded wonderful. It sounded like it had intention, like it was going someplace. And then they got stuck, and they called me and said, hey, come to London, we need a bridge. Got to figure out how to end this thing. So I went to London, and we ended the song, and I came back to LA, and I didn't hear it again until it was on the radio.
Give me the best of your love.
A lot of people played at their wedding, but it's actually a breakup song.
It's a breakup song. Best of luck to that couple.
Also talk about sitting at the corner booth at Tana's restaurant.
Yes, Sad Cafe.
I've read that they used to watch couples, watch women, different things like that. And a maitre d' that was working at Dan's was thanked in the liner notes about that song.
The guy who was the bartender that made me my first martini just died 2 years ago, COVID. It was heartbreaking. He was literally probably 71, 70, maybe my first martini. And when I was in there 3 years ago, was the last time I saw him alive, 2.5 years ago, maybe another. As soon as he sees me come in the door, he starts shaking one up and usually had one with me. And he was already a grown man when we were just farting around kids in there. So this guy must have had quite a constitution. Michael was his name. He's a wonderful guy. And then the owner, or the maitre d', Guido, is the one they mentioned in the liner notes. He's been a friend of all of ours for years. He ended up moving to Germany and opening another restaurant there, I think. But yeah, that was our Sad Cafe. We used to sit in the corner booth in the back in the East Room and, scheme our schemes.
Yeah, Lion Eyes, I know, was written at Dan's. They watched a young woman hanging out a much older man at the bar and just people watching.
That could be any night of the week.
People watching can be a big inspiration. You talk about the bridge. That's kind of a lost art in music. The bridge. Nobody writes bridges anymore.
Because radio doesn't want to play anything over 3 minutes long. As a matter of fact, they didn't want to release the record company, this is after Geffen had left, the record company didn't want to release Best of My Love as a single because they said it didn't have a chance. It was too long, too slow, no drums, steel guitar. Sorry, guys. And Henley and I were insistent. We said, no, that's the hit on this record.
Here in my heart, I give you the best of my.
Finally, a disc jockey in Minneapolis started playing it over and over and over. Started getting calls and calls, and it spread to Toledo, Cleveland, Detroit, all around the Great Lakes. And then all of a sudden the record company went, whoa, we better get off our ass. This is a hit. And they did this horrible edit. Nobody ever copped to it, but it was one of the worst edits in the history of show business to get it down under 4 minutes. And it just sounded fakey and awful. And, of course, we all went ballistic. Don probably cut somebody's throat over it.
Yeah.
Because by the time I got off this is before, I wasn't touring with them then. I was touring by myself. And by the time I got home, the edited version, the very poorly edited version, had been retracted, and they had rushed to print up hundreds of thousands of album versions, because that's what the DJs were still playing. We were still playing the 4.5 minute versions from the album. So that became the hit.
Oh, sweet darling.
Once you're playing it and people are loving it, what are you going to do? Turn it off and tell the audience, "I'm sorry, we can't play it. It went 6 seconds over." Well, it wouldn't, except for classic rock stations, it wouldn't get played now because they're back to those short songs again. That's what you were lamenting, the loss of interesting bridges, or at least the focus on them. And that's part of it, is because you're adding at least a minute or a minute and a half to the song by really putting a good bridge in it.
If I could go on sleeping.
Well, also the fact that they have to, I mean, you listen to songs from the 70s and 80s, some of the greatest songs that came out in that era. You don't even get into a vocal sometimes until 40 seconds into the song. That would never happen today.
No. There's a Ray Charles hit single of Makin' Whoopee. It's a live record. It's either Atlanta or at the Olympic Auditorium in LA. And the first time, all the way through the song, it's just instrumental. It's just trio, not even the whole band. That tempo. This goes on for a minute and 20 seconds or something. Then he starts singing it.
Another bride, another June.
So when they put out the single, they just took the intro from the beginning and started the vocal where he started playing the instrumental, and then made the instrumental the B-side of the record.
Do you remember the first time that you heard Best of My Love on the radio? Because you say you went out there and then you heard, the next time you heard it was on the radio. Do you remember the first time you heard it?
Well, I wasn't very surprised. I mean, I had been singing and writing with those guys for years, so I had a pretty good idea what it would sound like, but it just sounded so good. It sounded great. It just sounded like they'd made a hit record.
Oh, sweet darling, get the best of my.
That Don Henley dreamy vocal. It's just...
I know. And, no one even knew that he sung the first couple of years the Eagles were out, because Glenn had all the early hits. And he'd hear this beautiful thing coming from behind the drums. The part of the road crew used to call him Furry Basketball when he had a big natural hairdo. And Glenn and I would say, that's our secret weapon back there. And that's what we thought. For years, we called him the secret weapon. He's one of the most amazing singers I've ever heard.
Oh, sweet darling.
You wrote another classic, or co-wrote Already Gone, with Rob Strandland. That went to number 32 on the Hot 100 and number 12 in Canada, but another song that the Eagles do almost every concert. It's been a staple of their compilation albums. And what inspired that song?
Rob Strandland and I wanted to write a country song, and I grew up in San Diego in the suburbs. I listened to country music at night on the transistor radio under the covers when my folks thought I was sleeping. But I loved a lot of the country songs, and I was running a place called The Back Door at San Diego State University, a big coffee house. and it was supposed to be a bowling alley, but they didn't have the money to finish it off. So I took it over and was running it, and I had a gig there with Rob Strandland. Now as far as I was concerned, his parents were country singers. He lived way the heck out, 2.5 miles from me, out in the country, in El Cajon, and he had a horse and wore cowboy boots. So I thought he'll help me. And we're in the back room of the place, and we opened up these big refrigerator, and there was a jug, and we started drinking out of this jug, and it turned out to be hard cider. And I'd never had alcohol or marijuana or I'd never been high on anything. And I don't know why I started drinking this stuff. But suddenly I felt so great. And we wrote the song in about 20 minutes, And then part of the song, the greatest lyric in the song is, "Woo-hoo-hoo!" I just felt so good. And then we got on stage and we did the song, pretty much forgot about it. And I don't think I even did it much after that. I did it one other time. I was playing at a place in Escondido, California called In the Alley. And I was opening for a guy named Jackson Brown. Who hadn't had a record out or anything yet. I'd met him before. So I went and grabbed him and I said, "Man, I just wrote this song and I want you to sing it with me on stage." And he did. And it was already gone. And then just a few years ago, someone had taped it and they sent me the tape. And there's Jackson, doing the song. But then a couple years after that, when they were doing their third album, Glenn called me on the phone and said, "You know that country song? I think it'd make a great rock and roll song." And I go, yeah, sure. And then the next day he held the phone up to the speakers and the big speakers in the studio, and boom, there it was. So it's 3 chords and they repeat over and over, never changing.
Well, I heard some people talking just the other day.
I guess it was just a feeling. And I only kind of got drunk or high on alcohol that time and one other time. You'd think I would have just kept doing it. If you do something and write a big song, you think, but I never did it again. So there you go.
That's when they switched their producer. They were working with Glenn Johns and Bill Szymczyk. And that, of course, was a huge collaboration with Bill Szymczyk that was very fruitful after that. And a new guitarist, Don Felder, as well, played a Les Paul special on that. Just a rocking song.
Oh, man. Glenn did want to rock. And then a few years later, when he said, "Man, well, now we got this guy in the band, Joe Walsh. Now we're really going to rock." So.
Just looking up the lyric here, there was a certain lyric I wanted to ask you about. The letter that you wrote me made me stop and wonder why, but I guess you felt like you had to set things right.
But I guess you felt like you had to set things right.
Just remember this, my girl, when you look up in the sky, you can see the stars and still not see the light. That's right.
Remember this, my girl, when you look up in the sky.
Love that lyric.
I think a lot of that second verse was Rob Strandland about the letter and all. And then I think I kind of got in it where it was, you can see the sun or you can see the stars, but you're not seeing what it's really about. And I'm out of here.
See the stars and still not see the light. That's right.
And I like to think of the song as so much of pop culture is about don't give up. You're flunking out of school, work harder, keep working, keep focusing, keep at it, keep doing it. But a lot of times it's better just to give up and blow it off. And nobody says that ever, except for this song.
2 songs that are on the biggest selling album in American history, Eagles' or Greatest Hits. Just so cool. I'm sure they've made a little bit of money on that. Make sure to leave us a comment about Eagles and the 2 gifted songwriters who helped craft some of the band's greatest hits. In fact, their Greatest Hits album, 1971 to 1975, is the biggest selling album in American history and 3rd worldwide. It sold over 45 million copies. So what are your memories of this all-time album and the songs that are on it? 2 that we talked to today are on it. Let's have a great discussion, celebrate one of the greatest bands ever. If you like our content, we invite you to subscribe below. We would love to have you. We have a daily discussion every day about music. It's a lot of fun. Until next time, not 2. What am I doing to 2? That's a peace sign. 3 chords and the truth, my friends. Have a great day.